All right, let's talk about South Carolina. It's a story that's absolutely packed with drama, a place of incredible wealth, intense conflict, and a handful of moments that didn't just define a state, but honestly, changed the course of the entire country. You really can't understand South Carolina without getting this central conflict. Think about it. In its early days, it was one of the richest places on the planet, but it was also the very first state to break away from the Union and kick off the Civil War. First in wealth, first in rebellion. How does that happen? Well, that tension, that's the key to its entire story.
So, here's a quick roadmap of where we're headed. We'll start way back with its founding, touch on its role in the Revolution, then get into the big one, secession and Reconstruction, and finally, see how it became the state it is today. Okay, first up, how this all got started. And believe me, South Carolina's beginning was different. It really set the DNA for everything that came after. So when Charlestown was founded in 1670, you have to picture something unusual. These weren't your typical poor farmers looking for a new start. No, the real power players were rich planters from Barbados, and they didn't just bring their families. They brought an entire pre-packaged slave society with them. It's like they just copy-pasted their system from the Caribbean right onto American soil. This is huge because it means from day one, slavery wasn't just part of the economy, it was the economy.
And the result? It was immediate and dramatic. Get this, in less than 40 years, by 1708, the majority of people in the colony were enslaved Africans. A majority. That single fact changes everything. It creates this dynamic of a white minority constantly terrified of losing control, and that fear is going to drive South Carolina's politics for, well, the next century and a half.
So right away you get this massive split inside the colony itself. You've got the low country down on the coast. This is where the super rich English planters are, getting wealthy off rice and indigo, and they control everything. But then you go inland to the back country, and it's a totally different world. We're talking tough Scots-Irish farmers scraping by with very few slaves and zero political power. It was like two different states in one, and this fight between the coast and the back country, it's a story that just keeps repeating itself.
All right, so as the whole country starts buzzing about revolution against Britain, this deeply divided colony has a big decision to make. And yeah, it was not going to be straightforward.
And when the war came, South Carolina wasn't just some sideshow. It was a main event, a central battleground. We're talking over 200 battles fought right there. And a lot of it wasn't even Redcoats versus Patriots. It was a vicious civil war with neighbors turning on each other.
So the fallout from the war was massive and messy. For one thing, the state had a huge number of loyalists, people who wanted to stay with Britain. So the fighting was extra bitter. But here's a huge consequence you might not think about. For the enslaved people, the chaos of war was an opportunity. Around 25,000 people, that's almost a third of the entire enslaved population, managed to escape or they died in the conflict. Look at the numbers, it's wild. The black population plummeted from over 60% down to about 44% in just 20 years, a huge demographic shift.
Okay, so the revolution is over, America is a new country, but while the rest of the nation is debating what comes next, South Carolina, it just digs its heels in deeper. It becomes the brain, the political engine of the pro-slavery South.
And this chart just lays it all out. By 1860, right before the Civil War kicks off, look at this. The enslaved population is back up to being a clear majority, 57%. That's more than half the people in the state living in bondage. So you have to understand, for the white population, this wasn't just about money. It was about control. In their minds, this system was the only thing preventing a total collapse of their world. And to protect that world, they got creative. Leaders like John C. Calhoun came up with some really radical ideas, and the big one was called nullification. The idea was basically this. If the federal government passes a law we don't like, say a tax that hurts our economy, we can just ignore it. We can nullify it. I mean, it was a massive challenge to the whole idea of the United States, and you can see it now, right? It was basically a practice run for secession. And let's be crystal clear about why they did secede. There's no need to guess. When South Carolina left the Union in 1860, they wrote it down for everyone to see. This quote from their own declaration says it all, word for word. Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery. They weren't hiding it. They were shouting it from the rooftops.
So South Carolina starts the war, and the war absolutely wrecks the state. But what came next? The period we call Reconstruction, that was maybe even more of a seismic shift.
Reconstruction was a total roller coaster. You can really break it into 3 stages. First, the old guard tries to keep control with these laws called black codes, basically trying to reinstate slavery in all but name. Well, Congress wasn't having it, so phase 2 starts. Radical Republicans step in, and boom, everything changes. A brand new constitution, public schools for the first time ever, and black men are voting and holding office. A truly revolutionary moment. But then came phase 3, the backlash. White supremacist groups like the Red Shirts used pure violence and terror to try and claw that power back. And what ended it all? A shady backroom deal in Washington. To settle a messy presidential election in 1877, a compromise was made. The Northern Republicans got the White House, and the South got the federal troops pulled out. The second those troops were gone, the whole thing fell apart. The Republican government in South Carolina was toast, and the so-called Redeemer Democrats were back in charge. Reconstruction was over.
Okay, so with Reconstruction crushed, South Carolina enters a long, dark period of Jim Crow segregation and economic struggle. But the 20th century, that's when the state starts to change, slowly at first and often painfully, into something new.
You can really see this reinvention in the economy. After the war, it was still all about agriculture, mostly sharecropping, which was just another cycle of debt. Then, in the early 1900s, textile mills pop up everywhere. But by the middle of the century, those jobs start disappearing. So the state has to pivot, hard. It turns to tourism, and then, in a real game changer, it starts wooing big international companies to build factories there.
And if you look at the economy today, it is unrecognizable from its past. Manufacturing is king, but we're not talking about t-shirts anymore. We're talking high-tech cars from BMW and airplanes from Boeing. Throw in a massive tourism industry and modern farming, and you've got a much more stable, diverse economy.
The economy wasn't the only thing that got turned upside down. Socially and politically, everything changed. The civil rights movement finally brought an end to Jim Crow segregation. And that earthquake triggered a massive political shift. South Carolina went from being a die-hard Democratic state for 100 years to one of the most reliably Republican states in the entire country.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, it's pretty incredible. From a place literally built on slavery to a state that led a rebellion through a century of segregation to what it is now, a player in the global economy. It's a story of one massive, painful transformation after another, which really makes you wonder, what on earth is coming next?
Hope you enjoyed that deep dive. If you did, we've got a bunch more of these in our U.S. State Histories playlist, so definitely check that out. And hey, hit that subscribe button for notebook summaries so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for hanging out with us.